My husband said his ex's name at our wedding. I made sure he'd never forget mine. I dated my husband Robbie for 4 years before he proposed. Everyone said we were perfect together. We met at a friend's birthday party and talked until 3 a.m. about nothing important. He asked for my number and called me the next day. Not texted. Called. I thought that was so old school and sweet. We moved in together after a year. He cooked and I cleaned. He liked action movies and I liked horror, but we always compromised on comedies. We had a routine, and it was comfortable. And I really believed this was it. I knew about his ex Megan because everyone knew about Megan. They dated for 6 years through college and 2 years after. She dumped him for some guy she met at her job, and Robbie was wrecked for a full year before we met. His friends told me I was the one who brought him back to life. His mom thanked me once for making her son smile again. I never felt threatened by Megan because she was his past, and I was his future. At least that's what I thought. Our wedding was beautiful. Small ceremony with 60 people at this vineyard, which his aunt owned. I spent 8 months planning every detail. My dress was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The weather was perfect. What wasn't perfect was my husband getting absolutely trashed before the reception even started. His groomsmen thought it would be funny to do shots during the photo session. By the time we sat down for dinner, Robbie could barely keep his eyes open. I was annoyed but figured he was just nervous and overdid it. Then came the toasts. His best friend, Kevin, gave a speech about how Robbie finally found someone who made him forget about the one who got away. I thought that was weird, but people laughed, so I let it go. Then Robbie stood up to give his speech. He grabbed the microphone and looked at me with these glassy, drunk eyes. He said he was the luckiest man in the world. He said he never thought he'd get married after everything that happened. Then he said he couldn't believe Megan actually showed up today and married him. He called me Megan, at our wedding, in front of everyone. He started crying and saying he always knew Megan would come back to him. His mom rushed over and took the microphone. His dad walked him outside. I sat there in my white dress while 60 people stared at me. My maid of honor grabbed my hand and asked if I was okay. I wasn't. The rest of the reception was a blur. People kept coming up to me saying Robbie was just drunk and didn't mean it. His mom told me he was overwhelmed with emotions and his brain just glitched. His sister said Megan's name probably came up during the groomsmen's stories, and it just stuck in his head. Everyone had an excuse ready for him. Robbie passed out in the bridal suite and I slept in a chair in the lobby. The next morning he woke up and asked why I wasn't in bed with him. I told him what happened and he laughed. He actually laughed. He said that was embarrassing, but at least it would make a funny story someday. He said I needed to relax because it was just a drunken mistake. He asked if we could get room service because he was starving. I ordered him pancakes and watched him eat while I planned what came next. Our honeymoon was in Hawaii for 10 days. I acted normally the entire trip. Robbie thought everything was fine. He kept making jokes about the wedding speech and saying his friends would never let him live it down. He posted pictures of us on the beach and called me the love of his life in the captions. On day 3, I found out he still had Megan on social media and checked her profile regularly. I didn't say anything. On day 6, his mom texted him saying she was glad I was being mature about everything and not making a big deal out of nothing. I didn't say anything. On day 8, Robbie got drunk again at dinner and told me I was way better than Megan because I didn't nag him about his drinking. I didn't say anything. We came home and I started my plan. First, I stopped responding to his family. His mom would text me and I'd leave her on red for days. When she complained to Robbie, I told him I was just busy with work. Then I stopped cooking. I made food for myself and told him I assumed he would handle his own meals since he was an adult. He started ordering takeout every night and complained about the cost. I suggested he learn to cook. Then I stopped cleaning up after him. I kept my things tidy and let his pile up. When he asked why the apartment was a mess, I told him I only saw my stuff and my stuff was clean. He called me passive-aggressive. I told him I was just busy. Then I started going out more. I joined a book club that met twice a week. I started going to the gym every morning. I made plans with friends every weekend. Robbie complained that we never spent time together anymore. I told him we could watch a comedy when I got back and then stayed out until he fell asleep. This went on for 5 months. His mom confronted me at a family dinner and asked what my problem was. I told her I didn't have a problem. She said I was clearly punishing Robbie for something that happened months ago. I said I was just living my life. Robbie finally snapped one night and demanded to know what was wrong with me. I told him nothing was wrong. He said I had changed since the wedding and he wanted his wife back. I looked at him and said maybe he should call Megan since he seemed to think she was his wife. He went pale. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. Then he stammered something about it being a stupid drunk mistake, and me being crazy for holding on to it this long. I watched him squirm in our living room and felt absolutely nothing except a cold satisfaction that he finally understood I hadn't forgotten. The coffee table sat between us like a barrier. His hands gripped the back of the couch. I stayed in the doorway with my arms crossed. He tried to backtrack immediately, saying he loved me and only me, that Megan meant nothing to him anymore. His voice got higher and faster. I asked him why he still checked her social media every few days if she meant nothing. The question landed like a slap. I watched the lie die on his lips as he realized I'd known about that since Hawaii. His face went from pale to red as anger started replacing his panic. His hands dropped from the couch. He took a step toward me and stopped. He accused me of spying on him and violating his privacy by checking his phone and social media activity. I laughed. The sound came out harsh and sharp. I told him I didn't need to spy when he left his laptop open with her profile up while he went to get food on day 3 of our honeymoon. He had no response to that. His mouth opened and closed again. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door and said he needed space to think. The door slammed behind him. I heard his car start in the parking lot. The engine noise faded down the street. I stood in the same spot for a minute. Then I walked to the couch and sat down. The apartment felt different without him in it. Quieter. I spent the evening feeling strangely calm and clear in my head for the first time in months. The confrontation I'd been building toward finally happened. Now we were in new territory where I didn't have a script planned out. I realized I didn't actually know what I wanted the outcome to be anymore. Did I want him to grovel? Did I want him to leave? Did I want to fix this? I turned on the TV but didn't watch it. I made dinner for myself and ate it at the counter. I went to bed at 10. The sheets felt cool and smooth without him there. I fell asleep easier than I had in weeks. Robbie came home after midnight. I heard his key in the lock. The smell of beer hit me when he walked into the bedroom. Kevin's cologne, too. That strong, woody scent he always wore. Robbie was calmer but still defensive. He said I'd been punishing him for months, and it wasn't fair to ambush him like this when he thought everything was fine. I sat up in bed and turned on the lamp. I pointed out that everything being fine required him to never notice my complete emotional withdrawal from our marriage. He stood at the foot of the bed. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. We had our first real fight where both of us were actually honest instead of passive-aggressive. Robbie admitted he knew something was wrong, but was too scared to ask because he didn't want to deal with the wedding incident again. His voice cracked when he said it. I admitted I wanted him to suffer, but didn't think past making him uncomfortable to what I actually wanted from our relationship. We sat on opposite ends of the bed. Neither of us yelled. We just talked until 3 in the morning. The next morning, Robbie suggested couples counseling. I was pouring coffee when he said it. The suggestion surprised me because he'd always dismissed therapy as pointless talking. He said his mom told him last night that he was about to lose his marriage if he didn't get serious about fixing what he broke. I agreed to try it, but told him I wasn't making any promises about the outcome. He nodded and drank his coffee. We didn't touch each other. At work the next day, my coworker Haley Booker noticed I seemed different. We went to lunch at the sandwich place down the street. She asked if everything was okay while we waited for our food. I ended up telling her the whole story from the wedding to last night's fight. She listened without judgment. She didn't gasp or offer platitudes. When I finished, she asked if I actually wanted to stay married, or if I was just going through motions. The question caught me off guard because I hadn't let myself think about it directly. I told her I didn't know. She nodded and said that was fair. We ate our sandwiches and talked about other things. I spent the next week before our first counseling appointment actually looking at my feelings instead of just nursing my anger. I went to the gym and thought about it on the treadmill. I sat in book club and barely heard the discussion. I realized I wasn't sure if I was more hurt by Robbie calling me Megan, or by how easily his family dismissed my humiliation like it didn't matter. The wedding incident cracked something open about how his family sees me as secondary to their comfort. His mom's text to him saying she was glad I was being mature about everything kept playing in my head. Like my feelings were an inconvenience they were relieved to avoid. Our first session with Declan Foster was awkward and tense. The office smelled like lavender. Declan had gray hair and glasses. He sat in a leather chair while Robbie and I took the couch. We both tried to make the other look worse. I brought up the wedding. Robbie brought up the 5 months of silent treatment. I mentioned the social media stalking. Robbie mentioned me abandoning his family. Declan let us go for about 10 minutes. Then he cut through our blame game by asking what we each wanted from the marriage right now, not what we were angry about. Robbie said he wanted his wife back. I realized I didn't have a clear answer ready. Declan looked at me and waited. I said I needed time to think about that. The session ended with homework to write down what we wanted individually. We drove home in silence. I spent that week noticing things about Robbie I'd trained myself to ignore. He came home from work and asked about my day before turning on the TV. He opened a beer, looked at it for a long moment, then put it back in the fridge and got water instead. He did this 3 nights in a row. On Thursday, he made dinner without me asking, just spaghetti with jarred sauce. But he set the table and everything. I caught myself almost smiling at him across the table before I remembered I was supposed to be angry. The problem was my anger had become background noise instead of the sharp pain it used to be. I'd spent 5 months building this wall between us, and now I didn't know how to take it down without admitting I was wrong too. Friday night, he asked if I wanted to watch a movie, and I said yes before thinking about it. We sat on opposite ends of the couch during some action movie he picked, and halfway through, he asked what I was thinking about for my homework assignment from Declan. I told him I hadn't started it yet. He nodded and went back to watching explosions on screen. Our next session started with Declan asking me the same question he'd asked last time. I'd had a week to think about my answer, and I still struggled to put it into words. He waited while I fidgeted with my wedding ring. Finally, I said I wanted Robbie to hurt the way I hurt. Saying it out loud made me feel small and mean. I explained that after the wedding, everyone rushed to comfort him and make excuses for him, and nobody seemed to care that I was the one who got humiliated in front of everyone we knew. So I wanted him to feel what it was like when someone you love acts like you don't matter. Declan asked if it worked. I said I didn't know. Robbie was staring at me from his spot on the couch with this look I couldn't read. He said he didn't realize I was trying to hurt him on purpose. He thought I was just busy with work and friends. I told him that was the point. He looked like I'd slapped him. Declan asked Robbie if he wanted to respond. Robbie sat there for a minute before saying he understood why I was mad about the wedding, but he didn't understand why I couldn't just talk to him about it instead of disappearing for 5 months. I said I tried to talk to him the morning after, and he laughed in my face. He said he was hungover and stupid. Not that it was an excuse, but he genuinely didn't remember doing it until I told him. I asked him if that made it better or worse. He didn't have an answer. Declan let the silence sit there until it got uncomfortable. Then he asked Robbie to talk about Megan. Robbie went pale again. He said there wasn't much to talk about. Declan said they had all the time Robbie needed. Robbie took a long breath and started talking. He said he met Megan in college and dated her for 6 years, then 2 more after graduation. He thought they'd get married. Then she met someone at work and left him for that guy within a month. He said it felt like getting hit by a truck because he never saw it coming. She told him she'd been unhappy for a while but didn't know how to say it, so she just stayed until she found someone else. He spent a year after that barely functioning. His friends set him up with me because they were worried about him. He admitted he jumped into our relationship because everyone said I was good for him, and he wanted to feel normal again. But he never actually dealt with feeling like Megan threw him away for someone better. Hearing him say this made me angrier instead of sympathetic. I interrupted and asked why he was telling me this now, 6 months into our marriage, instead of before the wedding or during our honeymoon, or any of the times I gave him chances to be honest. He said he didn't think it mattered anymore because that was the past. I lost it. I told him it mattered because he clearly wasn't over her if he was still checking her social media and calling me her name at our wedding. I said it was convenient that he suddenly had all this self-awareness now that I might actually leave him. I asked where this honesty was when he laughed off the most humiliating moment of my life like it was no big deal. I told him I spent 8 months planning a perfect wedding and he ruined it in 30 seconds, then acted like I was crazy for being upset. Declan let me go until I ran out of steam. Then he asked if I was willing to consider that people can realize their mistakes too late and still deserve a chance to fix them. I said I didn't know. Robbie looked like he might cry, but he held it together. My phone rang 2 days later while I was at work. Robbie's mom. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. She asked if we could talk, and I said sure, expecting another lecture about giving Robbie a break. Instead, she apologized. She said she was wrong to dismiss my feelings at the wedding and wrong to tell Robbie I was being dramatic. She admitted she was more worried about him being embarrassed than about acknowledging he'd hurt me badly in front of everyone. She said she raised him to avoid hard conversations, which created a man who runs from problems instead of facing them, and she was sorry for that. She said watching him almost lose his marriage made her realize she'd done him no favors by protecting him from consequences his whole life. I didn't know what to say. She told me she wasn't asking me to stay with him, just that she wanted me to know the wedding thing was horrible, and she should have said so at the time. We hung up and I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. That night I told Robbie about the call. He said his mom had called him too and told him the same thing. I said I appreciated him trying in counseling, but I needed him to understand the problem wasn't just saying Megan's name. The problem was that he laughed it off and his whole family acted like my humiliation didn't matter compared to his comfort. I said I felt invisible in my own marriage. He sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. Then he said he got it now. He said he'd been so focused on not being the guy who got dumped and depressed again that he never thought about what I needed from him. He said he was sorry. Not the quick sorry he'd given before, but the kind that sounded like he actually meant it. Our next session focused on the social media thing. Declan asked Robbie directly why he still looked at Megan's profiles. Robbie squirmed in his seat before admitting he checked them when he felt bad about himself. Declan asked what he was looking for. Robbie struggled with the answer. Finally, he said he needed to know if she seemed happy, like he had to confirm that leaving him worked out for her. Declan asked why that mattered. Robbie said he didn't know. I sat there listening and suddenly understood. His obsession with Megan wasn't about wanting her back. It was about needing proof that the breakup made sense, that there was a reason she left him instead of it just being that he wasn't good enough. He was checking her social media like picking at a scab, making sure the wound still hurt so he'd know it was real. Declan asked Robbie what he thought would happen if he blocked Megan everywhere. Robbie said he didn't know. Declan said they could find out right now if Robbie was willing. Robbie looked at me, then pulled out his phone. He went through Instagram, then another site, blocking her on each one and showing me the screen as proof. It felt like a performance at first, like he was doing it because he was supposed to. Then he started crying. He said he'd been using her as an excuse to keep one foot in the past, because if he never fully committed to our marriage, getting hurt again wouldn't destroy him the way losing Megan did. He said he was scared. It was the most honest thing he'd said since the wedding. I reached over and took his hand. He held on tight. Declan turned to me and asked what I was protecting myself from. I said I wasn't protecting myself from anything. He waited. I said fine. I was protecting myself from exactly what Robbie just described. If I stayed distant and cold, then his drinking and his ex and his family couldn't hurt me anymore. If I didn't care, I couldn't get hurt. Declan pointed out that we'd been married for 6 months but acting like roommates who barely knew each other. He asked if we wanted to actually try being married or if we'd rather just end it cleanly. Neither of us answered right away. Finally, Robbie said he wanted to try. I said I needed time to think about it. Declan suggested we take a week off from counseling to individually decide what we wanted. No pressure, no discussing it with each other, just time to figure out if we were in this or not. I agreed. Robbie agreed. We drove home in silence again, but this time it felt different, less angry and more scared. That night, I got out a notebook and made a list of pros and cons like I was deciding whether to take a job offer. It felt clinical and wrong, but it helped me think clearly. The pros were that we had 3 good years before the wedding. He was genuinely trying now, and I did still love him underneath all the anger and hurt. The cons were that trust takes years to rebuild, and I wasn't sure I had that kind of patience. Also, I didn't know if I could ever forget sitting in my wedding dress while everyone stared at me. I looked at the list for a long time. Then I put it away and went to bed without any answers. I spent the week thinking about Haley's question and making my list, but I didn't tell Robbie what I was doing. He gave me space like we agreed, sleeping in the guest room and keeping his distance when we were both home. On Thursday night, he texted asking if I wanted to meet for dinner on Saturday at the restaurant where we had our first date. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before typing, yes. Saturday came and I changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater, nothing fancy or romantic. The restaurant looked exactly the same as it did 4 years ago. Same red booths and same menu boards on the wall. Robbie was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth near the back with water glasses already on the table. He stood up when he saw me and looked like he wanted to hug me but didn't. We sat down and ordered food we both knew we wouldn't really eat. He told me he'd started seeing a therapist on his own, not just for couples counseling but individual sessions twice a week. He said he was working on his drinking and his pattern of running away from hard conversations instead of dealing with them. He told me he was committed to the therapy whether I stayed or left, because he needed to fix himself either way. I watched him talk and saw that he meant it, that this wasn't just a show to win me back. I told him I wanted to try rebuilding our marriage, but he needed to understand it wouldn't look like it did before. I said I wouldn't go back to being the person who accepted being second to his comfort, who cleaned up his messes and pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. He nodded and said he didn't want that version of our marriage back either, because it was built on him avoiding things and me accepting it. We ate a little bit of our food and talked about what trying again would actually look like, the specific things we both needed to change. It wasn't romantic and my heart wasn't racing, but it felt honest in a way nothing between us had felt in months. Over the next month, we started building new patterns that felt awkward and deliberate but more real. Robbie started asking before making plans that affected both of us, instead of just assuming I'd go along with whatever he wanted. I spoke up when something bothered me instead of going silent and letting it build into cold anger. We both worked on actually listening to each other when we talked, instead of just waiting for our turn to speak. It wasn't passionate or exciting like our relationship used to be. We didn't laugh as much and we definitely weren't comfortable with each other anymore. But the discomfort felt necessary. like we were learning to actually see each other instead of just seeing the idea of who we wanted the other person to be. Robbie came home from work one Tuesday and asked if I wanted to watch a movie, then actually waited for my answer instead of already having one picked out. I told him I had book club, and he said okay, and made himself dinner without complaining that I wasn't there. Small things like that happened every day, and they added up to something that felt more like partnership than our old routine ever did. We went to counseling every week, and Declan kept pushing us to be specific about what we needed instead of vague. I learned to say things like, I need you to text me if you're going to be late, instead of I need you to be more considerate. Robbie learned to say I'm feeling stressed and want a beer instead of just drinking and pretending it wasn't a problem. It was exhausting work, and some days I wondered if it would be easier to just give up and start over with someone new. Our first anniversary came around, and we both knew we had to acknowledge what happened at the wedding instead of pretending it didn't exist. Robbie suggested we stay home instead of going out, and I agreed because I didn't want to be in public for this conversation. He handed me an envelope at dinner, and inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long. He apologized specifically for laughing it off the next morning, for treating my humiliation like it was no big deal just because he was embarrassed. He wrote that laughing at me hurt worse than the drunk speech itself, because it showed he cared more about avoiding his own discomfort than dealing with the pain he caused me. He said he understood now why I spent 5 months punishing him, and that he deserved every bit of it. I read the letter twice and then told him I was sorry too, for the months of silent treatment instead of just telling him I was devastated and needed him to care about that. I said I was sorry for trying to hurt him back instead of asking for what I actually needed. We sat at our kitchen table and cried together for the first time since the wedding. Not pretty crying, but ugly sobbing that made us both snotty and red-faced. It wasn't a happy anniversary, but it was an honest one, and that felt more important than celebrating. We're not fixed, and I'm not sure we ever will be completely. I still have moments where I remember sitting in my wedding dress while 60 people stared at me, and the memory makes my stomach hurt. Robbie still catches himself reaching for a beer when he's stressed, and I see him pause and choose water instead. We talk about these moments now instead of hiding them or pretending they don't happen. Our marriage looks nothing like I planned when I was picking out flowers and centerpieces for that vineyard wedding. It's harder and less comfortable and requires constant attention instead of just coasting on routine. But maybe that's okay because the plan wasn't working anyway. We're actually trying now instead of assuming everything is fine because we don't fight. Some days I think we might make it, and some days I'm not sure. But at least we're both here doing the work instead of one of us carrying everything while the other checks out. That's more than we had before, and for now it's enough.